Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very last edition of the show for the year 2025. What a journey it has been. And I'm so glad that you and I could make it to the end of 2025. And as the year 2026 knocks, it is my earnest wish and desire that we will all have a prosperous and enjoyable 2026. Welcome again. On December 26, 2025, Nigerians woke up to the news of a surprise U.S. military attack on ISIS location in Sokoto State, northwest Nigeria. The Christmas Day attack was first confirmed by no less a person than the U.S. President, President Donald J. Trump, through his true social media account. Subsequent statements issued by the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, as well as the U.S. AFRICOM Center, did confirm the attack. So far, Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has remained mute on the strike action, though official statements as confirmed, including statements by the Nigerian Army, that the strike was carried out in collaboration as well as in coordination between US and Nigeria. Later reports confirmed the attack was probably launched from a US military platform in the Gulf of Guinea. And the impact of the strike spread across local governments in Sokoto State, including Tambuwal and Tangaza local government areas of the state, and in Offa, Kwara State. Now, there are unanswered questions on the reach and impact of the military strike. But needless to say, that Nigeria's political and security environment in the year 2025 is indeed reshaping public trust, economic stability, and civic participation ahead of the new year. My guest on the show today is Dr. Hussaini Abdu, a respected governance, security, and humanitarian expert with extensive experience across Nigeria and West Africa. Dr. Abdul is the president of the Sawaba Institute for Development and Humanitarian Practices based in Abuja, Nigeria. He is a seasoned public intellectual, international development specialist, and humanitarian leader with over 25 years experience driving transformative change across Africa and beyond. His work spans humanitarian response, governance, social justice, human rights, and environmental sustainability. He is an author, and one of his most recent publications is titled Identity, State, Society, and Ethno-Religious Conflicts in Nigeria. All right, thank you for joining me today, Dr. Abdul. Let's start by discussing the issue of, the hot issue on the table right now in Nigeria, the U.S. military strike against ISIS location in Sokoto State. Can you tell us, how do you see that particular action by the U.S.? Is this something that is welcomed by Nigerians, and in particular, those who live in those parts of the country?
Okay, by Nigerians, well, I don't know. I thank you, Bara. I think this is quite a very important question, and this is a very it's an ongoing conversation in the country, and like Nigeria is a very deeply polarized country. Many times, whether local or international event, actually shaped by this level of polarization. So it is so difficult for one to say, or Nigerians like it, or Nigerians don't support it. But the way it goes within the social media or media conversation is more like, Nigerians are hard done with the years of violent conflicts, banditry, terrorism, harder farmers conflict that has pervaded the country everywhere. Insecurity is practically everywhere in the last 15 years. And I think Nigerians are tired of it. And Nigerians are more like saying, wherever and whichever way we are going to get help, we are happy to receive it. It's like what in my cultural setting, they say that when the drowning man is just trying to get out of the water, even if you give him a sword to hold on, to use him, pulling him out. He doesn't mind. He may be out bleeding and all that, but all he wants is to get out of it. And I think to a large extent, this has been the attitude of most Nigerians to this particular incident. Of course, there are those who think that the strike, that the ultimate solution have come, and therefore we'll be out of this problem very soon, which is outrightly wrong. And of course, there are also those who think that, well, this could send a strong signal, and probably it may be the beginning of the solution to our problems. And there are also probably those who feel that it will compel the government to do the right thing in dealing with these issues. But when it comes to the communities where these strikes happen, I think there are two dimensions of them, or three, if you like. One is in Offa, which is far, far, far away from the Northwest, and many times people are not talking about it. There are stories around the debris dropped there. Some of us who have been following this event very closely think that what happened there was a full projector, not a debris. From what the pictures are showing and from the damages that we have seen, is a full projectile that dropped there, wasn't the debris. Then the main one, and of course the people in Offa are angry, and rightly so, because they don't think that there is any terrorists there. But I believe that it was a mistaken strike. That's my understanding. It was a mistaken strike. And sometimes this is what happens when you are working remotely in terms of having a strike. But in terms of what happened in Sokoto, in particular, Jabo community in Tambuwal local government, and in Tangaza, which also has experienced it, is that yes, it caught people by surprise in the first place. By surprise for two reasons. One, the reasons given by Trump on the fact that he had saved Christians from being killed on the Christmas or Christmas Day killing, is that, this particular community is almost 98% Muslims, almost 98% Muslims. And if you find any Christian there, of course, strong settlers, you may probably not find a church in that community. In Jabo, I can say that categorically you wouldn't find. In Tangaza, I'm not too sure whether there is any there. Jabo in particular has not experienced any major crisis in recent time. All through this process of banditry in that region, there are no bandits there. There hasn't been any incident in that area. Tangaza, yes, Tangaza had some incidences here and there. And then we've also seen the Lakurawa pass through that route. The stories we are hearing at the moment is that the Lakurawas were the targets. That's the story we heard. But it is not showing that very clearly. The military had saying that some camps have been hit, but at least the government hasn't been transparent enough to tell us the extent of damage, who was the target, and under what framework did this particular hit actually happen. It hasn't come from the government so far, and that has not been helpful to the conversation. Lakurawa's affiliation to ISIS is suspect. It is not clear. And for those of us who have been involved on trying to understand these dynamics of violent conflicts in the country, even if we want to link Lakurawa, we'd rather link them up with Al-Qaeda, with Al-Qaeda than actually leading them with ISIS. That axis does not have. I think the base of much of the ISIS presence is in the Lake Chad. It's in the Lake Chad Basin, which in the northeast of the country, that has been battling with the Boko Haram insurgency in the last 15 years. So I think if ISIS were the target, I think they went to the wrong region. And even if Lakura or Bandit were the target, they actually had a wrong hit. This happens in remote warfare, particularly when you're actually working with GPSs, and it does happen. And this is what I expect both Nigeria and the American government to actually say. But it's not a good message because it's the first hit. The first hit should actually be more accurate, to be more systematic, and that gives confidence to people. But for the people there, I think it came with an initial shock. But because they didn't expect it, and surely I don't think they should be. And then the second one is that it became even quite a very funny thing, because instead of people running the helicopter sector, they were actually running to look at the projectile and see and taking pictures of the projectile, which is typical of what you
Well,
see.
that reminds me of the attitude of Nigerians when a
Yeah,
petrol tanker falls. Rather than
yeah.
running away, they run to school.
They run through it, and now there are different skits in some of these Hausa online social media skits.
Wow.
People, oh, somebody actually carried one of the projectile and went to what we call Mgongon. These people who's buy scratch metals,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then they weigh it, and it was weighed 100 kg, and now he went back, he realized that it's 150 kg and he needed more money. And typical of how Nigerians make jokes
yeah.
out
We'll
of
find humor in everything.
it.
But you see, while you're still on that point,
Yes,
I'm glad you did clarify that yes, the initial shock, but it's also a qualified welcome action in that part of in that state or in those areas. But there's a question that has been agitating the minds of many. I've read some piece also. Why Sokoto? Why not Brno? You did mention that Lakurawa's connection with ISIS is perhaps debatable, more with Al Qaeda, you know.
yeah.
But we know that ISWAP, which is Islamic State in West Africa province, has been more prominent in the Lake Chad, Brno axis. So why? And let me add more context to this question. You and I know the importance of Sokoto when it comes to the
Islam.
religious issues in Nigeria. It's the seat of the caliphate. And the Sultan of Sokoto is such an important, personality when it comes to Islam in Nigeria and indeed in West Africa. So why is it that this strike action targeted Sokoto State and not Borno State? Is there a subtext to this?
Well, I don't know. I think there are conversations going on now at the aftershock, and many of us are beginning to understand and also reinterpret these issues. Yes, like I mentioned earlier, if we actually want any element within the ISS or ISWAP structure is in the northeast, that is where they've been very active, at least in the last 10 to 12 years. The initial years were largely very local, Boko Haram led, who had actually been looking for international affiliation on their own, begging for international recognition and affiliation. And first with Al Qaeda, and then later on they went with ISS, and now they had a split, and there's a huge or layers of ISS or ISWAP cells in that location. But very quickly, by Bodrin, is that the Islam didn't come to the Hausa land or this modern Nigerian side through Sokoto. Islam has been in northern Nigeria axis since the 14th century, and almost the same time in some part of the southwest. But the Sokoto Caliphate itself was a 19th century event, and therefore there are about 5 centuries between the coming of Islam and the Sokoto Caliphate. But the conception of Islam that the colonialists met, which was the Sokoto Caliphate that they met, had its headquarters in Sokoto, and Sokoto has been very, very important to Islam. It was the headquarters of the Caliphate, and even during the colonial time, they changed the title to also make it the Sultan, and made it the Sultan. They call Sultan of Sokoto, and then the Sultan is like the chair of the northern traditional rulers, and it has been so since the colonial time, and it's also the head of Jamaatul Nasr Islam, which is more like the associations of Muslims in the country, almost like Khan, except that this one is rooted within the leadership of a traditional ruler. So that's how important Sokoto is. There are no, in terms of strategic intent, it is not too clear. But if you look at it, for you to understand this intent, you must look at the politics in the United States and Trump's evangelical base and the Nigerian politics in terms of Islam and Sokoto itself. One, and I will be making this hypothetically, could this actually be a symbolic thing to actually satisfy a particular constituency in the United States by recognizing that a very important segment or Muslim segment had been hit in relations to the perceptions or the narrative of Christian genocide in the country, and whether that sends a very strong signals to that evangelical community there. That's the first hypothesis. So that's more political than actually strategic. The second, for me, is that America hadn't probably prepared quite enough, but was also very much interested in sending a message, and therefore we're looking for a more quicker a target from whatever base that they were actually looking at, and decided to hit. They had a target, and they probably, because remote warfare has its strength and it does have its limitation. Precision strikes are not always as precise as sometimes as often projected, because again, if the strike is precise and the target is not precise, it becomes a problem. So when you have a mobile target, precision strikes does not really work that easily. It expects a certain level of stationary presence, at least for a particular, a limited period of time. It could be minutes, it could be a minute, but for that limited period of time. And therefore, if the precision strike did not correspond with the precision of the target or the stationary process of the target, it could miss. But that's my second hypothesis. But both Jabo and Tangaza did not give us that. We have tried to dig in. We've sent people to help us find out from some of those communities, and there are some of our colleagues some colleagues in those states who have visited those locations, and it is not clear that there was a deliberate target. I knew that the military spokespersons did come up to say that there was some Lakurawa base that was really attacked. But if you look at the Lakurawa formation, Tangaza is not really an important base within that context. But we heard the story around the logistics and all that being hit. I actually think that there's an element of the Nigerian government to also save face. I don't really think that they were informed or they were aware of the strike. I don't deny the fact that there have been conversations in terms of how America could help in this process, particularly after the escalation around Christian genocide. There have been discussions around that, but I don't really think that this particular strike, Nigeria had a decisions or recommendations in terms of where to strike, what time to strike, who the target was actually is. No. I want to believe that after the strike happened, yes, of course, there have been conversations between the Nigerian Foreign Affairs Minister and the Secretary of State of the United States to say that we've done this, and we believe.
But our Foreign Affairs Minister claimed that. Well, let me not say he claimed. Did say that he and Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke 15 minutes before. That also raises a lot of issues, because if your counterpart is giving you a 15 minutes, heads up, so to say, that we're doing this, whatever projectile. I'm not a military analyst. I think I'll hide under your cover. I know you've taught at the defense in Nigeria. How long it takes for the projectile to travel either from the Gulf of Guinea or an unmanned drone. From the look of things, it appears it was a tomahawk from a ship somewhere off the Gulf of Guinea. 15 minutes is hardly enough time for a proper reaction. And within that 15 minutes, he also had to talk to President Tinubu, as he said, So it raises a lot of questions about how collaborative this collaboration was. And uh, Nigerians are, and of course, I think the rest of the world are demanding greater accountability in that regard. So my question is, what does this portend in terms of these security cooperation and agreements that the US and Nigeria says they have established? At least a committee has been set up. We know Nigeria announced its own committee members, the NSA, the Chief of Army Staff, and so on. But we've not heard about the US component of that committee. If maybe they chose not to announce it or not, wouldn't that be a sort of a clearinghouse, so to say, where at least some high level discussions can take place before actions like this, are initiated?
With due respect to my good friend, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I respect, and I'm saying it with all sense of responsibility because I know him and I know his depth and I also know his passion for the country. Things may not be going the way he wants it probably, but I have tremendous respect for him. But I think that there is something shady, there is something that is being hidden out there. And I actually feel that the Nigerian government was practically working to save face. And this collaboration is not an American collaboration. It's Nigeria that is asking for collaboration. America was ready to do unilateral actions. It's Nigeria that was actually saying that we want to do, and that is why you could find Nigerians saying we have a committee to do this, but on the other side, you are actually not getting it. I want to believe that with all sense of responsibility, my knowledge of this country and my knowledge of international politics, I don't actually think that strike actually has Nigerians. Nigeria was part of the decisions to actually make the strike. I don't think so. It doesn't. It was extreme symbolism from the side of the American government. It could be a prelude for something much bigger, but it has a strong symbolic intent, and I don't think Nigeria was part of that decision to strike. But again, when you lead a sovereign nation and this kind of unprecedented incident actually happened, as a government, you have two options. One option is to fight back, is to start firm, is to assert your sovereignty and say was unacceptable and mobilize the rest of the world to sympathize with you. That's the first option. And that was not the option that Nigeria was ready to take. From the beginning, Nigeria wasn't ready to go into any confrontational stand. And that's understandable because, again, Nigeria is a very deeply polarized country. If you lead this country, you just have to manage it really well. Very polarized. There were a lot of Nigerians who were begging for this strike to happen, and they have done everything possible to demand for it. And yet there are Nigerians who are very, very much against the strike, as much that they recognize what the challenges that they are experiencing. They actually feel that it is the irresponsibility of the Nigerian state that has led us to where we are today, and that if the government and succeeding government, and I'm not referring to this government in particular because this crisis didn't start now, that if succeeding governments have actually behaved responsibly and managed this process better, we probably wouldn't be where we are. The second option that you have, if you are not ready to do that, is actually to find a way to save face. And that's one of those ways to save face is actually to say that, look, we have been in discussion. No doubt they have had meetings. We've been in discussion with this government. And therefore, they did give us a prior notice before this happened. I don't really I think the button has been pressed at the time that conversation was taking place with the minister. I may be wrong, but my knowledge of this, my understanding of American strikes, my understanding of international politics, my knowledge of the current state of Nigerian government, and is that decision had been taken. The strike has already been on the way at the time that conversation was taking place. And I don't think any responsible government that is trying to save face will say now that, oh, we didn't know about it. This just happened. Yeah.
No. Thank you for that. I think I see some of the commentaries, watch some on the news, and I always ask myself if the person is speaking on the other side is a government representative, would you see anything different? But
Absolutely, you won't see anything different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you to put on your humanitarian work hat
Yes.
for a moment. You know, and you've made reference to uh, the nature of the strike,
Yeah.
GPS initiated strike and so-called precision strike. Uh, I think luckily there were no civilian casualties,
Yeah.
either in Jado or I think it's Jabo or
Jabu.
in
Yeah.
yeah, in
Or Tangaza.
Tangaza
Tangaza. Yeah.
we understand, you know, the Lakurawas, you know, came out of their shells and ran in different direction. But my question really is this: what risk, you know, come with international, uh, uh, you know, uh, attacks like this, you know, international strikes like this, you know? So what kind of risk does that hold for civilians and humanitarian actors?
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing. For those of us who work in this kind of context, we love to work with some level of predictability. That you know that this is a war zone, this is a crisis zone, and you don't want to go to that area. Your security people run an assessment and say it is not safe to be in this area. You have to be in this other area, and if you have to be in so area, then you have to be there within that particular time, and make sure you leave before time. And because there's a pattern has emerged, and because of that pattern, you are able to avoid collateral, what they love to describe as collateral damages that often happen. So, but when you are dealing with lack of predictability and no pattern, because this is an emerging issue, and it actually went to an area that nobody foresaw, we didn't expect, because even the Lakuras are one of some of the most mobile, I want to say insurgents groups, if you want to describe them as such, in between Niger border through Nigeria, Sokoto axis up to KB and up to some of the forests of the Borgu Game Reserve. So the Lakuras are quite mobile in that sense, and their categorization is still a big challenge, even for those who are in the field, who are analyzing this. In one breath, they were protecting communities against bandits at a particular time, and this is what actually happens when you have a hybrid governance, where you bring arms group to protect you. When they protect you, then they exploit you. So that's the dynamics that actually even part of the dynamics of the Lakura. So they are quite, of us, their proper categorization is still a challenge. And so one of the biggest risks is the risk of civilian casualties. Because you can imagine, if Japo was bigger than it is, that projectile wouldn't have fallen in an open field like it did. Of course, some of the scratch, this scratched some people here and there, but it wasn't any major casualty. And the same thing in Tangaza, and that it could easily have fallen into innocent people's home like it did in Ofa, and that can be quite devastating, and it could mobilize communities against even the government that was working probably to end or to stop the banditry or the insurgents from those areas. And we have seen that in the history of this country. We've seen several, including very recently, several Nigerian Air Force strikes that have hit innocent communities and killed people in their multiple, whether it's in the northeast or it's in the northwest. These are regular happenings that we have seen, and we've seen how that actually mobilized citizens against the government, and it could lead to another layer of crisis that we're trying to avoid. But the biggest challenge is more around civilian casualties, because, like I kept saying, precision strike are not often as precise
Yes,
as
precise.
most
Yeah.
like we like to say. Yeah.
Thank you. As much as I want to move on to some other questions, let me ask this last question.
Yeah.
You know, as it relates to this military, U.S. military strike in Sokoto State, and how that fits into the broader security crisis in the Sahel region. You
Yeah.
know, Sokoto borders Niger Republic, so it's all Kebbi and so on and so forth. So, are there risk or how does this figure in the broader, Sahel crisis? Do you think this kind of action may reopen conversations between Nigeria and Niger Republic in particular? Since the coup in Niger Republic, relations between both countries have kind of gone sour, and the multinational joint force, I don't know to what extent that is still active in that part of the world. And Nigeria can't do it alone, just as Niger also can do it alone. So how does this fit into that broader Sahel region crisis?
Sahel has been in violent crisis in the past 20 years or more. The collapse of Libya had also led to the massive escalation that we have seen. Nigeria is in the central part of Sahel. And of course, what made Nigeria slightly different is that it is partly in the Sahel, and the substantial part of its population is still in the south of West Africa, and that quite really helped. Otherwise, the extent of the crisis in the northern Nigeria, particularly the northwest and the north central, is almost equivalent to what you have in Niger, what you have in Burkina Faso, and what you have in Mali. And that probably, if you had removed the southern part of the country or from the central Nigerian area, you remove it and it's just northwest and the northeast, you probably will be having almost what you have today in Niger, or what you are having in Burkina, or what you're having in Mali. And again, the crisis in Nigerian borders, particularly in the western borders, is not just the Niger. You also have a brewing and escalating situation in northern Benin Republic, which shares a significant border with the northwestern part of Nigeria, running straight from Kwara through Kebbi to Sokoto, all through Kebbi rather, and they are all bordering northern part of Benin Republic. And then Burkina Faso is not too far from that axis as well, even though Nigeria does not share immediate border with Burkina. But there's a tiny strip between where Niger meets Nigeria on that axis and where Burkina also borders Niger. And so Nigeria is just at the heart of it. And of all these countries, Nigeria has a better economy. So that's the interesting part of it. And therefore, their presence in Nigeria is an attraction because it provides the kind of economy that the other countries are actually not able to provide. A single kidnap incident can actually mobilize the kind of resources that you are probably not able to get in Niger, even if you kidnap the whole village, or you might not be able to get in Burkina Faso because of the nature of the economy. And that's the dimension that a lot of us have not been looking at it. We isolate these countries and discuss them individually, but we're actually not seeing how the political economy of each country shapes where these people move into and what is the attraction and where they are moving into such location. Would this lead to? I don't think so. I don't see that happening. I actually think that Nigeria hasn't probably done enough in terms of leadership within West Africa and building and strengthening its relationship with Niger. Yes, the coup happened in Niger, and unfortunately, it wasn't managed well, whether by the Nigerian junta or the Nigerian government or even ECOWAS as a body. I think that being civil society and also being part of those conversations at different levels with different countries, there are things that we probably would have done better that we actually haven't done, and probably because it happened when this particular government was just sworn in. It doesn't understand the dynamics of West African politics at the time it happened. It didn't have its ministers. There were no major advisory.
It was really a knee-jerk reaction,
Yeah, it was a knee-jerk. It was a knee-jerk reaction, which backfired, and I work well. I think the American intervention would rather scare Niger at the moment, particularly when Nigeria is claiming to be doing it in cooperations with the United States. It would rather scare Niger because, again, they didn't trust Nigeria in any way, and that was what informed the Burkina Faso's reactions to Nigerian's Air Force plane that landed in one of their airports. You could see what happened. It was supposed to be a very simple thing to be dealt with, but because there are these underlying issues around the attempted coup in Benin, the relationship between Nigeria and Burkina and Mali and Niger, so all those things shaped up. So once and part of what is scaring these countries is the perception that some of these countries in the West have lost their original, the countries they're used to controlling, and Nigeria has taken over that space. And they give a very good example of France. Nigeria's relationship with France is particularly more cozier than any of the French colonies at the moment, apart from probably Ivory Coast. Cote d'Ivoire. So Nigeria has a very cozy relationship, and many of these West African country or ESA country, they think that this is happening because the French wants to use Nigeria against them, and Nigeria's role in aborting the coup in the attempted coup has actually been used as an example to show how Nigeria is being used. It's not clear. I also sometimes also believe that some of those things are maybe exaggerated in terms of those conversations. France has always had a very big presence economically in Nigeria, even while it was still in control of some of these colonies. Of course, because of Nigeria's market, the sheer size of Nigerian market, the French investment in Nigeria has hitherto been much bigger than any of the West African, Francophone West African countries, except probably Burkina Faso. That has been there. But again, the Nigerian's relationship with France has never been at the expense of the Francophone countries. So what we are seeing now is that the relationship with France is at the expense of the Francophone, of many of the Francophone countries, particularly neighboring countries like Niger. So I think I don't see that helping us in any way. I feel that it could scare Niger more. It can only help if probably America is able to manage its relationship with Niger. Probably he was able to get back his drone station and whatever in that place, and then that works. Because the difference between what is happening between Nigeria and United States and that of Niger and United States is that, look, the Niger had a framework. They have a relationship that has been established and with clear responsibility defined between the two countries. We're going to station our drones here, and this is what they are going to do. This is the land that you are going to occupy. This is going to be the movement site. So there is a clear framework. But for us, we don't have. People can actually say that is on the offing. It's probably on its way. That's why we have the committees. But the action is already taking place without that frameworks actually happening. I know that Nigerians are more looking at the solution. They want these things to end and all that. But you see, we always have to have a country before we actually think of any other thing at all. This is about it's not simply about national sovereignty. Sovereignty entails so many things. It's political, it's emotional, it's territorial, it's psychological, it's deep. It's deeper than we often see. And I agree with many Nigerians that the succeeding government had failed in its responsibility. And where this failure happens, people can actually seek for help from anywhere. And this is what is informing some of the attitude that I'm seeing. But I tell my friends, there is an interesting time to be a Nigerian. I have a very difficult time to actually be a passionate Nigerian, because you see some things that probably historically may actually be an abomination. But it happens now with celebration. My